My name is Matthew Todd, and welcome to Inside the Scale Up. This is the podcast for founders and executives in tech looking to make an impact and learn from their peers within the tech business. We lift the lid on tech businesses, interviewing leaders and following their journey from startup to scale up and beyond, covering everything from developing product market fit, funding and fundraising models to value proposition structure and growth marketing. We learn from their journey so that you can understand how they really work, the failures, the successes, the lessons along the way, so that you can take their learnings and apply them within your own startup or scale up and join the ever-growing list of high-growth UK SaaS businesses. Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Nemo D'Qrill. Good afternoon as we record this today. Great to have you here.
Good afternoon, Matthew. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. Looking forward to this conversation and where this goes. But as always, I'd like to start with the guests introducing themselves, their company, a little bit of background. So over to you. Tell us about yourself and your company.
So I'm Nemo D'Qrill. I'm Danish originally, an academic in the first part of my life, doing mathematics and these things. And one day I decided to found a company. More correctly, I built a small piece of tech that turned out to do surprisingly well in testing. And I determined to put a bit of my life towards that. And that piece of tech was the foundation of Polaris, the business I'm currently running. And it combined some of the things I looked at during my early PhD days, which had to do with mathematical representations of the human minds and errors of reasoning. And it went in to profile people based on their performances in tests and online assessments, and use that to inform profilings and hiring decisions about them instead of CVs. And the main idea was just that I've known a lot of people that got opportunities not because of their credits but because they looked a certain way. Also lost opportunities. The first job I got, I only got because they lost my CV and called me to interview. All my colleagues were master's students or graduates. And I came out straight off the army.
Yeah. 3
months later, I was presenting the installation where I was working to the royalty because I was one of the best at the job. Now, I've met so many amazing people that didn't get treated right through the system, and so many people that got unjust advantages as well. And I thought, hey, maybe we could do something about that if we use a little bit of science instead. Objective, meritocratic approaches.
Interesting.
So, that's a little bit about me and Sigma Polaris. There's a lot more to say about both, of course.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think it's really good to kind of hear that background and a little bit more about Sigma and kind of what led you to that. I guess I'd be kind of interested to know a little bit more about, or just to start with at least, what was it what was that early testing like that kind of led you to think you've got something that could be, widely applicable, valuable, have commercial worth?
Sure. This could be considered an automation tech. Now it's so much more. But basically, you take a piece of a very human-led process and you put in a piece of tech in one piece of it. Now, not all of it. That would be impossible. That's a future thing. Black Mirror. Maybe 100 years. We will see. But in that one bit, which is a pre-screening before you have interviews, I thought, okay, let's try and build something small for that. And my initial goal was to remove subhuman biases and increase diversity while doing as well as a recruiter would in average. Yeah. And the shocking thing was that when people used this, they did way, way better. And that's when I was starting to getting really interested, because I thought, okay, not only can we have a social impact, but we also have a quality impact. There's a very famous study from the States that looked at judges, and when they would give paroles to various candidates, they were trying to find correlations between the severity of the crimes, which universities the people came from that had gone to prison, or if any education, their demographics, etc. And this massive, really amazing study showed that the main correlations between getting parole and not getting parole was the proximity of when the judge had food last.
Wow.
So right in the morning and right in the early afternoon, way more people, about 65%, would get parole. And then they would tail down towards zero at the end of the day or right before lunch.
Yeah,
now,
that's really
obviously,
interesting.
The judges wouldn't even know this, right? This was a natural error. And it's not their fault as such. It's definitely worth paying attention to after it came out. But human beings make mistakes like that all the time. And the idea of being able to aid humans make fewer such mistakes was appealing to a mathematician, and also obviously a social impact I could align with. For the sake of the audience, I don't know if you can see my video, but it says down in the bottom, they, them. I'm a non-binary person myself, and one of the reasons I'm passionate about this topic.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting from both of those perspectives, the quality perspective, but also that social impact perspective, removing or attempting to remove bias from that part of the process. Obviously a massively interesting, important area. You could argue it's certainly in the public eye now more than ever, but always, should have been important and should continue to be important. And one thing I'm kind of curious about is, how do you measure how effective that technology, was and is?
Oh, that's a very good question. So I think there's two different ways you can measure this kind of thing. But most of the time, what you need to do is you need to do a bit of a baselining. How impactful is an electric car? Well, an electric car is still bad for the environment, but it's better than a fossil fuel-based car. So you need to compare yourself with various standards approaches and then look at what are the levels and errors that occur in those approaches. What you then do, for instance, to say if you remove the issue of naming bias, well, then in that case, you've removed that entire portion of the error. And then you start calculating. Then, of course, you also look at the outcomes and see, do people actually also look, behave different and diversely. But in the end of the day, all of these things added together, both the direct and the indirect measurements from early studies, indicate that we prevent 29 cases of bias on average for each hire. Now, companies don't necessarily need to care about this because of social reasons, even though, of course, that is very much in the public eye. But this is 29 cases where you made suboptimal decisions on people's skills because of a mistake. The fact that the mistake was something we socially care about is secondary. You misevaluated people. That means you might have done the wrong hire. And that's just a business loss of opportunity. Yeah,
I see. So certainly excluding a lot of people, a significant number of people that were probably better suited for the job, which could lead to wrong hiring, delayed hiring, and obviously impact on the business.
Yeah. And on top of that, the numbers are just so clear. Like, the difference is not just something you shouldn't remove based on. Like, all of the numbers that look like McKinsey's Deloitte reports, their the Harvard Business School a massive report as well. Like, all of them just prove that the teams with more divergence outperform.
Yeah.
That's so you should aim at getting more, not which is just so humorous that then some companies are not progressive enough are still removing based on an asset. It's a little bit like, oh, you're too good at mathematics, we cannot possibly hire you. It's a silly kind of reasoning.
Yes. No, absolutely. So in terms of kind of launching Sigma Polaris, then getting that off the ground, how have you found that journey? How receptive have companies been? Was it an easy launch process? I'm sure most launch processes are not easy, but great to hear a little bit about how that was received and how you've kind of proceeded to grow this so far.
Well, I think many entrepreneurs will struggle with this question because a launch is not a one-stage thing. First of all, we need to go out and test the product. We need to build the product, then test the product, then refine the product, and then start pushing to market. Each of these launches comes with their own excitement and their own frustrations. How have I found it? Very difficult, I think. That doesn't mean we haven't had success. But as an academic entering the industry, I have been quite surprised about how much perceptions matter and how much the ability to communicate internally, also in departments, about matter, like and politics, how these things can be really quite important.
Yeah.
Which most of this audience will find obvious, but hey, that's why I came in naive and one of my many learning journeys. I think one thing that I found shocking is how people are surprisingly dismissive of science. They don't care about necessarily the McKinsey, Deloitte, or Harvard Business School reports. They will say they trust all of them as sources, but then if the sources don't align with what they believe entirely, then they dismiss them. I find that an interesting kind of confirmation bias that, certainly this is not a general issue, but it definitely explains why progressive companies just do better, because they're the ones that are willing to listen to new voices, new research.
Yeah.
I've found that the tone that you deliver something with matters an awful lot. If you go in and say, this will prevent an error or this will help you get better, it's a subtle difference.
Yeah.
But it changes the reception quite a bit. Some people strongly prefer one. Some people strongly prefer another. As a mathematician, you will say the analogous cases, it has the same impact. But the same impact does not mean that the story is going to be equally receptive. And I think the biggest the biggest learning that I have gotten has been that the same product and the same impact and the same values are going to be received very differently at different stages of your launching process and by different people. And possibly more important than the product, or more important than the impact, is the way you tell that story.
Yes, absolutely. I think that story matters. How it is positioned, how it is received, more importantly, is everything, really, because it's that perception that causes people to engage and buy the products in the first place, without which you obviously have no customers. But then further down the line, it also, I think, impacts the success that they do or do not receive, and the value they do or do not receive based, when they do actually use the products, based on their perceptions and expectations coming in as well.
No, absolutely. Like, we have some competitors in the space that have beautifully designed products that on a very scientific level couldn't possibly work. And they still have great success. And that's because of the communication being done in such a amazing way. And that doesn't mean they don't necessarily have some impact or that it's completely useless. But it's been quite interesting as a scientist to look at some of these products being pushed amazingly well.
Yeah.
And how the market reception has been to some of their narratives.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Yeah, I've certainly seen many products in many sectors have not very much in terms of products per se, but have achieved a large number of customers because of their expertise in communicating that message and getting it across. One thing we did talk about last time that I'd certainly be interested in talking about a couple of things, but just to start off, you mentioned kind of issues with, or not issues per se, but you mentioned it's important to be cautious when receiving advice from others, be they mentors, be they other people. And one thing, I want to promote on this podcast is diversity of many things, but certainly approaches and methods and models of launching and growing SaaS businesses. So I'd certainly be interested to hear kind of how you have found interactions with those kind of advice givers.
Yeah, no, I think the further you get into anything, the more you realize that no one really knows what they're talking about. And that's completely fine. We debate it, we discuss it, and we try different things. And the ones that work, we move forward with. There was a study from Edinburgh University that's coming out showing that neurodivergent teams, that is people with ADHD, that's dyslexia, like higher functioning autists, etc., they outperformed neurotypical teams in almost every metric, but there was more conflict.
Yeah.
Now, conflict can be managed, and it's not a bad thing. It's disagreement. It's good. But that's an expected matter when you have different people in the room, even if they're brilliant. Now, one thing when you are a startup is you don't have that many people around you, either inside of your business or advising you. And one thing you sometimes forget is that if you took 5 brilliant people and put in a room to help you with a matter, they would all disagree. That's fine. But what you sometimes do is when you have one of those brilliant people in the room, you just believe everything they say is true. It's not. That's fine as well. But that thing with learning, that just because someone has 5 years marketing experience doesn't mean that they know anything about marketing. And even if they do know about marketing, that doesn't mean it's right for you in your current circumstances. And we all come with different background belief. And from their perspective, it might seem like an obvious thing for you to do, but that doesn't mean it's right. And that thing to think and challenge people and their backgrounds in a very constructive way, I found quite useful, because I came in sort of treating it much more like science or something like that. Where it's like, let's learn all of the different bits. And let's listen to the people that know an awful lot about it. And you absolutely should, and take the advice. And there's so many people that want to give advice to startup, and it's a massive boon.
Yeah.
But be critical, because in maths, there might be a straight, easy answer. But in sales, marketing, market positioning, product development, time management, HR, there are not that straight answers.
Absolutely. So how do you then evaluate those differences of opinion, or in some cases the only opinion you may be getting about a particular topic? Have you found any kind of effective strategies for testing different ideas that you hear, whether they conflict or don't?
Well, there's several different approaches you can take. I think the one thing that's quite important for a startup is to say that the best idea doesn't need to be the one you should go with. Because in a startup, you cannot do everything. And that means the best marketing approach is probably not accessible to you because of other resources and because of other timelines. That means that the person that gives you marketing advice might give you the very best advice, but that might not be an option.
Yeah.
And maybe the most optimal thing you can do is take idea number 3. But the marketing person will obviously, advice giver or mentor or similar, will not have the whole overview of everything. And they will also only be an expert in marketing. So it's thinking the best marketing idea may not be the best business idea. It is really quite useful. The other one, if you know nothing about it, you really just have to make a decision. You have 4 different advice givers. You can take a bit of a weighted average. If you have 3 different priorities from each one of them, you can list them out. You can, like, as options. You can basically do a point system. You say, like, option A, option B, option C. And you put the order that the different people put them in. And then you can time that by how qualified you think the person is.
Yeah.
Say between 0 and 1. Now, this is not ideal, and it's still a finger in the air, but it's a way where you can sort of be like, okay, well, based on this, it seems that all of the advice for option 1 will give us this much, for option B this much, option C that much. Therefore, we should go with option C. But I think the most important thing is really always to remember that the best idea for one part of your business might not be the best idea for the entire business moving forward. And it needs to be part of that same storyline, that same strategy. Like, it's the reason the business model Canvas is so vastly successful, is that trying to tie it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Considering the context as a whole and your context as a company founder and the stage of the business is likely to be vastly different from the context of any mentor or advisor. And I'm sure they come with their own biases generally in terms of how their experience has been shaped, but also biases to their interaction with you and your company as well, and what they might seek to get out of that relationship in future.
But also, a designer will always tell you to spend more time on your design.
Yeah.
But at some point, you need to just push it. A marketeer will always tell you that you can sharpen up a narrative. But at some point, you need to knock on doors and go over to sales. And sales will always say, we should just focus on selling. We don't need a better product. But sometimes you need a better product.
Yeah.
And these are, So it's that's a bit with being a founder. You need to match it all up.
Yes, and there probably is no right answer, but it's just important to make a decision and move forward rather than stay still and not make a decision at all. So I think for the audience that we've got, I think one thing that would be really good, with your background and with the background of Sigma Polaris as well as a platform, I think it'd be interesting to talk about the first hires, early hires, kind of forming that initial team as a startup that's started to gain some traction. How what's your perspective and what have you seen in terms of the importance of diversity, and how can founders approach that and manage that as they get their first hires on board?
Well, I think one of the first things is to say, if you want to be successful, you need people to disagree with you. And not just advisors and mentors, and then you follow in line. Like, you need that healthy debate and discussion. And that's where diversity is just amazing. Like, getting someone in that has a different age, getting someone in that has a different gender, getting someone in with a different cultural background, educational background, socioeconomic background, all of these things will give you that minor challenge that'll help you refine and sharpen up. Even if you're right, they might knock some edges off your argument. You might, where I think so many founders are looking for someone to tell them that everything they're doing is great.
Yep.
So many founders are sitting there and be like, please tell me my product is lovely and that what I'm doing is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think it's fine to have some of those people around you, but I actually think that it's your team. You want people that are passionate about what you're doing, that are passionate about your mission and your vision, but also that are more than happy to be critical about the way you're going to get there. And the moment someone is comfortable with that idea, I think diversity comes very naturally. Where I think diversity partly is hampered by the fact that people are like, oh no, they might disagree. Oh no, they might think differently about the way we should approach this. And even if they think differently, it doesn't mean you have to go down that way. But it's still really useful if someone says, I think we should cater to a different demographic.
Yeah.
And then have a brainstorm on why, pros and cons. And even if you never change a single thing from what they're saying, you might still get insights. So I don't think you should do diversity just for the sake of diversity. I think you should do it because that's your only way of sharpening up things. When you cannot commission marketing agencies to do reports for you, when you cannot go out and do massive research projects, what you do is you use your team. And if your team has the same backgrounds and thought patterns as yourself, then you might as well just think about it harder yourself. But that has never been a solution to anything, except for really complicated mathematics and possibly chess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a lot of interesting points in what you just said. And one thing that kind of comes to mind when you talk about, passion for the mission and combined with, differences in background, it seems to me that I've seen a lot of people mistake trying to find people with shared values, i.e. shared vision and shared mission, which is, critical to success. You need, a founding team that really believe and are passionate about the problem that you're trying to solve. I think a lot of people kind of conflate that with thinking that they then have to have very similar backgrounds and thought processes and everything else that goes alongside that. But of course, those two things don't have to go hand in hand. You can, be passionate about the same problem, but think there's a different way to solve it. And that's something that you should seek out, I think.
No, absolutely. And this is where the culture elements also come in. As a founder, you set the culture you want to some extent, and it's the way you communicate with others and treat others. And that's also where if you are embracive of constructive debates and brainstorming and all of these things, then it's your choice. And if you're not, then that's also fine. But what you then do is lose out on this opportunity to sharpen up everything.
Yeah, and I think that the way that you describe this, I think your mathematical background is very evident in the way that you describe evaluating, different arguments, pros and cons, and different weightings of these things. But I think too often people will jump to an emotional response of, oh no, someone has done something different. They have challenged my idea of the perfect product. How, as you say, they seek out people that say, oh, I love that, you're doing the right thing. But sometimes I think the most important feedback is, the most important way you can often find out whether you are doing the right thing is by deliberately seeking out that criticism.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, we've had some other people on the podcast as well, and they've talked about deliberately, yes, seeking out customers that love the product, love what you're talking about, and will of course sign up, but combining that with a very deliberate approach of seeking out customers that won't buy it right now and are very critical, or even buyers in the same company, and then say, well, why is that? What would we have to change for it to solve your problem? And then go back to them once you've thought about that and decided whether you want to address it, and then address it and go back to them and say, okay, this is what we've got now. Is this right now? And keep repeating that process until they either tell you to go away or say, yes, that's now meeting my needs. And I think that sounds quite similar to your approach, really, in terms of what you're describing about kind of that healthy criticism.
Yeah, to some extent. Though, of course, you can also do it with the companies that really like you. And, you can say brainstorm should be constructive, and then afterwards you sharpen up the ideas. Where, like, I don't think having a team that has disagreement necessarily means that, like, sort of, because with the client example, it's as though they are less likely client. But let's take the client example. In that case, if you take the difficult client, you might get the next 10 years of your product roadmap out of working with them. But that doesn't mean you're going to do like half of the things they suggest immediately. Maybe you only do 2. But you got all of that feedback, and much of it was really useful. And some of it you just completely discard and be like, well, they are not the target anyways. Similar to how if you hire someone from a culturally different background from either yourself or your demographic, maybe you don't want to ever cater to them. But their challenges might still help sharpen you up for your main demographic, because they will challenge you differently. And that's the really useful thing. That's when you start to become unique and innovative. You don't become innovative by doing exactly what has always been done, which is also why you don't become innovative by thinking exactly like your customers. Of course, you need to reflect it, but you also need to have more than that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I completely agree. So in terms of, Sigma Polaris, then how have you kind of navigated that internally with a team? How are there any kind of useful tactics that you found for kind of getting the appropriate level, and, well, not even appropriate level, but the right perception of that kind of healthy debate and difference of opinion?
I think it could be quite useful, and this might also reveal a bit about myself, but I think it could be quite useful to go to the extremes, which is to say you do a brainstorm where you really try to do everything with a yes and attitude. That's a term from improvisational comedy, but also used in various business contexts, where you go in and you take someone's idea and you say yes to it. And with that, following that and statement, you build upon it. So someone might say, I think we need a new logo. And instead of saying, I think that's a stupid idea, you say, yes. And I actually think that our color palette could be in this general direction. Someone else will say, yes, and then at the end of it, you might determine actually going for this general idea is not great. But having that constructive, try to build upon, is really quite useful. But then you can also have the destructive approach, which you need to say in advance and be dealing with, which is like, I'm now going to challenge an idea. I think with this idea, what about these 3 concerns? What about these 2 objections? Is this even feasible? But if you mix those 2 things together too much, you can get a situation where people are nervous about sharing new ideas.
Yeah.
Which you really don't want. You want people to be able to share new ideas. But if you only share new ideas and you don't get critical, then you're just wasting time having people share, crazy ideas all the time. So I think it can be useful to communicate, this is now the type of exercise we're doing. This is now the type of exercise we're doing. I know some people lead this very differently, and they try to always have more of a balanced approach in the middle. And that's probably possible. But I think the easiest approach is just to split it up into 2 different cases and say, most of the time we operate in the middle, but now let's do a positive session. And now let's do a constructively confrontational session.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think, thinking back to many exercises I've been involved with, I think it can be very easy to come out of a meeting where there are differences of opinion with a very average outcome, where you end up implementing something that is almost the least polarizing
Yeah.
by default. And I think it would certainly be interesting to try your approach and set up in the appropriate way, as you say, seek to follow an idea to its logical conclusion, but then also try and play the opposite stance to that and say, well, what if we didn't do this? What are the things that could be wrong with this? What is the impact of this? And I think that does lead to more critical thinking.
And devil's advocate. Take the person that liked the idea the most and ask them to present the reasons why it's bad. It's a really good exercise. And it creates a very healthy environment where people can share ideas much more freely. The devil's advocate. It's a term used for, the selection of new popes, where it's someone that has to go in and try to find good reasons why not. And it's a really important thing. And it's not always the most comfortable, but it's really useful. And especially if you take a person that's a big fan or big proponent and you ask them to switch, it gives you perspective from the other side, which will hopefully enrich in your general view.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly have seen that a few times. The rare occasions people have run that kind of exercise, that, as you say, regardless of whether the outcome is the same or not, I think everyone does, at least then buy into that outcome a little bit more, with a little bit more understanding and more accepting of the compromises that may be made and the reasons for them as well.
Yeah. I'm from Denmark, as I mentioned in the beginning, and sometimes we'll have ministers that will be commissioned to do not commissioned, but asked to present a case for something that they don't want.
Yeah.
And they will do it. They will write all of the positive reasons and all of it. And because that's their job, is to say, give us the best reasons for why we should invest more into wind turbine technology for the next 10 years. And, that ability to put your own preferences aside is just first of all, as you say, if you do these types of exercises, you get a wider company buy-in, but also you get a smarter team. So there's a little bit of growth involved in it as well.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back to what we started off talking about, which is trying to break down those unconscious biases as well, by forcing you to challenge your own beliefs, whether you are, then become consciously aware of whatever bias led you to, overly reinforce a particular, part of that argument or not. I think it does promote that more critical thinking and therefore less bias in that decision-making process.
Yeah, absolutely. You might find some good arguments. You might also find out that the arguments are even worse than you thought they were. Regardless, you learn something.
Yeah.
Where, if you speak to your mirror, you don't learn that much.
No, very, very, very true. So, just conscious of time. And I think there's also, we've covered quite a lot in the last 30 minutes. And I think something that, regardless of stage of company, I think our audience, should take a lot away from this conversation. And I hope will then go back to their own company and do a bit of that critical thinking themselves. Then in terms of Sigma Polaris, what's next for the company journey? How do you see the platform evolving? How do you see the impact that you're trying to make, kind of evolving over the coming months and years?
So we're looking at growth at the moment. It's we've done the research we had to do. We've proven our various things. Our messaging is obviously not perfect, but it's getting sharpened up, and all of this will always be the case with a startup at any stage. And right now we're going to look at that stage where we have to start growing. We have some ambitions with an investment round at the end of the year. I'll not go into details at the moment because details will depend on traction. But we are going for as aggressive traction as we can in the next 4 to 6 months so that we can start having a more international impact following this investment round, hopefully.
I see. And what is the vision overall for the platform, for the company?
The vision isn't for the platform or the company. The vision is for the world, an impact business. And what I mean with that is, I think the way people are doing recruitment is silly. Like, not always. Some of the times it's really quite brilliant. But the status quo, which is, get a tons of CVs in, look at them, use all of your biases to your best of your abilities and try to find some people. Like, it's shown to be really bad. And I hope to show with Sigma Polaris how you can do way better. But whether it's Sigma Polaris or the world catches up, I really hope that in 50 years, no one are using the archaic processes we're using anymore. And I hope that in 5 or 10 years, Sigma Polaris will have become big enough that we will have been part of accelerating this process. Because this is going to happen no matter what. The question is when, the question is how quickly, and the question is how scientifically.
Yeah.
So my vision is to accelerate that change as quickly as possible. And sure, exit as a unicorn is part of the process.
Oh, why not? Why not indeed? But I think that's obviously a fantastic vision to have. And I think, my first thought when you kind of said, challenging that whole CV approach is that, it is an archaic approach. It is, and all we've really done to date, or not all, but for the most part, what I've seen implement is really a digitization and literal translation of that old analog process, but then not applying, global working models. And I think one thing that has happened over the last couple of years with, remote working and now more hybrid working, I'm certainly interested to see how that whole world of work changes once some of those geographical barriers at least are broken down.
It's definitely going to have an impact, definitely pushing things in the right direction quickly.
Yes, I think it's an accelerant. So I think, with that, I think thank you again for taking the time today. If anyone has any questions or wants to find out more, obviously we'll put links for Sigma Polaris in your profile in the notes as well, so people can go and find you online if they want to have a look themselves. Thank you again for a very interesting conversation and thought-provoking conversation. Are there any kind of last words of advice before we wrap up?
No, I would say, don't do diversity for diversity's sake. Do it because it works. And if you don't believe it does, then try to challenge yourself about that a little bit, just for 15 minutes, by Googling the topic. And if you still don't think it does, then reach out to me. Because so don't do it because some regulator is breathing down your neck. Do it because your company will do better because of it.
Fantastic. I think that's a perfect place to end it. So thank you very much. And I look forward to speaking again soon. I'm sure there'll be many more future interesting conversations to come.
I'll look forward to it, Matthew. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Scale Up. Remember, for the show notes and in-depth resources from today's guest, you can find these on the website insidethescaleup.com. You can also leave feedback on today's episode, as well as suggest guests and companies you'd like to hear from. Thank you for listening.